A couple of days ago I did a poll on my channel to determine what character I'd make in Garden Warfare 2 next, and you all decided Snapdragon, so today we're going to be making Snapdragon in Garden Warfare 2. So unlike the other two characters I did before, I already have a model for Snapdragon in Garden Warfare 2 I used in my Graveyard expansion mod. So the model is built off Chomper since obviously we can't import animations from BFN in Garden Warfare 2. But I'm not gonna lie, this is the most awkward character to rig since Chomper's burns are quite weird to work with. But I got the Graveyard expansion model in the game and this is how it looks. So I wanted to make it so his eyes move around similar to what I did with the Acorn, so I took the shaders and I separated the eyes from the rest of the model and got this result. Now with the model complete, I have to get in all the voice lines for Snapdragon from BFN. This in itself isn't very difficult, but it can be really tedious since I've got to import all the different sound effects, but this is the result that I got. So with the basic visuals and sound effects done for Snapdragon, it's time to work on his weapons. The thing is though, Snapdragon's weapons are kind of already in Garden Warfare 2 in a way, since most of them are very similar. So like his primary weapon is just fire chompers but with a few changes. His secondary is kind of similar to Spooky Squash's fire spit but obviously with a few more adjustments. And the Blue Blaze's ability is very similar to the super guided Ultra Ball. While these three weapons are very similar to stuff that's already in the game, the other two abilities aren't going to be so simple to make. But let's start with the primary weapon, which is going to just be built off fire chompers. Early on into developing Snapdragon, I had to think about which version of him I'm going to do. You see, throughout the lifecycle of BFN, they made a lot of changes to characters, and Snapdragon is no exception. I decided to go ahead and make the version that's in current day BFN since it is the best version of Snapdragon. This means that I have to replicate the longer fire breath that he has in game, which is not something that's on Fire Chomper in Garden Warfare 2. So I duplicated Fire Chomper's weapon and started working on the effects for it to make it a bit longer, as you can see here. This is just the first part of it. I had to make some adjustments, and to be honest, effects are some of the worst things to work with in this game. Like, how many next processes do I have to go through just to get to the colour of the effect? So after a bunch of messing around, I got this as my result. As you can see here, the flame is a lot longer than it should be, but obviously it's not doing damage yet. So I spent about half an hour changing different values in the buff before I eventually realised that I haven't even put the new buff inside the weapon, so I wasted about half an hour just changing values for no reason. But I finally got some sort of result, and you can see here it's now doing damage from a bit further range. So now it was onto the sound effects, which weren't actually that bad because in BFN they reuse a bunch of Fire Chomper sound effects for Snapdragon, and since I'm building it off Fire Chomper, they're already all there. So I kept in the sounds that are in BFN and Garden Warfare 2 and then imported all the sound effects for Snapdragon that aren't in the second game, and this is what I got. Now you can see it doesn't overheat right now, and that's because I'm going to have to remake a whole new overheat system just for Snapdragon. This is because I don't think there's a single way I can make it so the primary and secondary share the same overheat. So to make this work I had to build it off the thing that Toxic Brains uses to charge his legendary meter. So how the buff works is Toxic Brains will gain a small charge every time he lands a punch on a target, before it eventually gets to a value of 1. So if we change this from every time he lands a punch he'll charge the mode to every time he fires his weapon he'll charge it, we can make an overheat system. Even though we've got the system working, I now need to go through and change the values to make sure that this works just right. You can see here the weapon's overheating too quick and the penalty time isn't very long, and also the decay that's meant to happen when you stop shooting isn't very quick either. In BFN you can fire the Snapdragon's weapon for approximately 8 seconds before you overheat with a 5-second penalty time. This is something that is going to be quite difficult to replicate with this buff, so I had to go through and do a bunch of math to try and get it just right. I eventually managed to make it so you can fire the weapon for about 7 seconds before overheating. It's not exactly 8 seconds, but it's only a 1 second difference, so it's not too much of an issue. So with Toxic Overload, once you get the charge filled, it will apply a buff to your character. We can use this to apply some sort of input restriction to Snapdragon so he can't attack once he overheats. And with all that done, it's time to work on the secondary for Snapdragon. So I started out by building this off the weapon for Spooky Squash, and I also put the sounds in straight away just so I could get an idea on what it would look like and sound like. So now to make it so it shares the same overheat system as the main primary weapon. This isn't too difficult since all I have to do is make it so instead of the one buff applier that the regular primary uses, instead the secondary is going to use multiple of the same one that apply at the same time when you fire. So instead of it just charging a small part of the meter, it will now charge a large amount whenever you use a secondary weapon, as you can see on screen here. So So the final thing I wanted to do for the primary weapon is make it so it has a proper stamina meter for the overheat bar. Since I don't know how to do this, I found a tutorial on YouTube on how to make custom stamina meters, and I put it in the mod, and as you can see here, it worked. So now I'm going to start developing the different abilities for Snapdragon. I'm going to start off with a flame trail, since that's probably the hardest one to do. So my idea is I want to make it work similar to Park Ranger's weapon, where you drop a projectile and it has an AoE. If you stand near it, you get damaged. Now this kind of works, but the problem is I can't make it just go directly forward. Instead it's going to put a bubble, and if the character stands in that area, it will damage them. So I decided to stick with this idea, but the main thing that needs to be done now is the effect for the fire. So what I thought I could do is replace the smoke cloud that Park Ranger does with the flame. And what I'd do is get each individual flame as a different emitter and have it where it moves forward a bit so it gives the effect that there's multiple different flames there. The effect itself works, but putting it in the place of the smoke cloud doesn't change the position depending on where you shoot it. You can see here what the issue was. So I thought this was never going to work and I'd have to come up with a new idea completely, until I thought about applying it to a turret that you spawn in with the ability. So what I did is I changed it so it would drop the projectile when you use the ability, and then afterwards it would spawn a turret as well. The turret is an invisible heal flower and it has a buff applied to it which adds the effect. And this is the result that I got. So all I have to do for that weapon now is add sound effects, but until then I actually wanted to go back and change up the model a little bit. So the idea was to change up the little leaves on the bottom to make them a bit thinner, similar to what I did with Acorn. Now I went through multiple different ideas on how to do this. My original idea was to do it the same as I did with Acorn, but the problem is the leaves aren't as straight as the ones on Acorn, so if you try and just shrink them it doesn't work properly. So what I did instead is I deleted all the faces on the bottom of the mesh and just had the top part, and then used the solidify tool to make it have more depth, so it gave the idea that it was a lot thinner than what BFN has. You can see now I've just got to pose the leaves to fit the ones in BFN. I decided to make some adjustments though, because I didn't realise until later on that Snapdragon's leaves kinda, like, the bend upwards, as you can see what I'm doing here. Like, the original idea was that they'd just lay down similar to Chomper, but that's not accurate to what he is in BFN. Now I have to transfer the weights across from the new leaves to the ones in Garden Warfare 2, and then once all done I can get it in game. Here's what the new leaves look like on Snapdragon. You can see here it's a lot more polished compared to the old ones. So now with a few changes to the model, it was time to work on Swoop Slam. I've made a few weapons similar to Swoop Slam in the past, so this shouldn't be too awkward, but my idea is to build this off the heroic kick that you use in the sky. Since it works similar to how Swoop Slam works in BFM, where you can rather fire it forward and you go down slowly, or you can fire it directly down and do like a ground slam type thing. The problem is though, the heroic kick uses a single buff to launch down, but for this we're going to have to use 3 different buffs to get it to work like it does in BFN. We're going to need a buff for him to launch in the air, another one for the dive bomb, and finally an explosion to do damage when it hits the ground. So I started off by just giving him the basic dive bomb to see how it would work, and this is the result that I got. So with that working, I decided to make the launch buff and the explosion buff to go with it, so I can get a full chain going and then make some adjustments afterwards. Now it works, but the problem is I removed the sprint buff when I was going through different things from the dive kick that I need to remove, so once I get it back in we can see how it looks. So with it somewhat working now, I thought I might actually try and make it have a camera offset similar to what it has in BFN, but yeah, it just didn't let me put a camera offset on it for some reason, so instead I decided to work on giving it more gravity and changing the explosion effect. So the effect is now working, and soon I'll be able to swap out the sound effect for one used in BFN, but the gravity is still not set just right yet. Because at the moment Snapdragon's able to get across the entire map since the gravity's not pulling him straight back to the ground after he gets in the air. We want him to have a steady decline on his leap instead of having to collide with a wall so he goes down. So after a few changes I managed to get it to work somewhat similar to how it does in BFN. So now if you angle your camera at a certain spot, you'll be able to go higher or lower with the weapon. So the final thing I need to do for this weapon now is give it the effects and sounds. With that now complete, it leaves me with one more ability to make for the character, which isn't actually very difficult to do since it is basically just a projectile that follows targets. So I got a basic version of the blue blazes in the game and used some of Torchwood's effects as placeholders. So now with the placeholder effects, I decided to give it its lock-on feature. It's not very difficult to give a weapon homing, since all you have to do is make sure it's a missile projectile and then just go in the weapon blueprint and swap out the custom weapon type to the one that Rose uses. So with the homing added, I decided to go through and give it some proper effects and also give it the sounds from BFN as well. So I went back and adjusted the model a little bit. I changed up a few other things like the leaves near his feet just to make sure they look like they did in BFN. Then it was time to work on the icons and metadata for it. So I made a custom render for his icons since obviously the one from BFN wouldn't really fit here. You can see all the abilities have icons and names now too. And he also gains XP as well because I made it share with one of the characters that's in the main game. Now I wanted to go back and change up Swoop Slam a little bit and make it so he hovers in the air for a bit longer before he dashes down, because that's what he does in BFN. And finally I decided to do a quality of life change to the mod and make it so you have to scroll down to find the new character so don't get too cluttered on the menu. And with that out the way, everything for Snapdragon is now complete, which means it's time to get onto the gameplay. If you want to download the mod for yourself, the link will be in the description, but yeah, I hope you enjoy the gameplay. So thanks for watching this video. If you did enjoy, feel free to leave a like and maybe subscribe if you want to. I'll have another poll out on my channel to determine the next character that I do on this series, so if you want to determine what character I do next, check out the poll. But yeah, thanks for watching, see you all in the next one.